Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Kinsey, and I am with the Strive Group in Anchorage, Alaska. And on the line today, I have Jim Bates with... Good morning, everyone. I think we are now currently live. My name is Heather Kinsey, and I'm with the Strive Group in Anchorage, Alaska. Okay, hold on. We're having playback. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. That was a technical problem on my behalf. So good morning again. We'll start this again. We're having a restart. My name is Heather Kinsey, and I am with the Strive Group in Anchorage, Alaska. Today's webinar is focused on cybersecurity, and we are fortunate enough to have Jim Bates with Business Improvement Group walking us through this candid Q&A. Jim, can you go ahead and advance your slide just one? I'm going to let Jim take over the reins here, so you'll see I will get off camera and I will mute myself so Jim can take over. But I wanted to let you all know, if you have questions for Jim, all you have to do is submit them via the chat that you should see on your right-hand side of your screen. And today's topic, obviously, is cybersecurity. Next week, tune in for sessions on topics such as maintaining productivity, the disruption to your workforce benefits, such as health, wellness, and wealth management. We'll have topics, or we'll have webinars on business liability and compliance. We're planning on doing these every weekday for the next 3 or 4 weeks, specifically for you, the business owner or business manager or supervisor, same time every day. So Jim, I'm going to go ahead and disable my camera and my microphone and take it away.
All right, thank you, Heather, and good morning, everyone. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. Crazy times we're in, and that brings up our topic of cybersecurity, and it's something I think it's on a lot of people's minds, having to telecommute, work from home. So I have just a couple of slides that have some reminders about cybersecurity. Some of these you're probably aware of, if not. But while you're working from home, it's just things to be aware of. Social engineering, that's where somebody that maybe has access to your home, someone who maybe your teenagers bring over that might not be credible. You just got to be careful about that. Shoulder surfing, where they're looking over your shoulder, finding passwords, information, things that when you're in your work environment might be different than when you're in a home environment. Phishing attempts, which most of you are aware of those. There's a lot of creative ones going out there now. You'll see a lot of warnings going out from the FBI and other agencies regarding, I'll get your $1,200 check or your federal check, and don't click on those. The federal government's not going to email you about your check like that. So anything that comes in, if there's a question, don't open it. If you have IT staff that support you at home, either from your place of work or you're contracted out, you can always run that by them. Some policies with companies is that if you have a malicious email or one you suspect, you can delete it. Just don't delete it out of your waste paper basket in your email, your deleted items folder. You can let the IT people then access that, but it's quarantined once it's in your garbage can, and they can look at it. Passwords, just know that at work, there's probably password policies that you normally have, and those passwords, when you're at home, might be different accessing if you're using your personal equipment to access work. Be aware of that. And people, you're distracted with being at home, maybe kids in the house or other things, and just be aware about passwords and who has access to your systems. And then secure networking. So if you're working from home, you're not on the same network you are when you're at work, obviously, and you're using probably your in-house Wi-Fi or wireless access and your internet service provider. And so just be aware that there might not be the same level of security in your home that you would have at work, obviously. So then cyber citizenship, that's just how to conduct yourself as a cyber citizen, whether you're at work in a public place or you're at home in your privacy. Just, conduct yourself with the same core conduct that you would anywhere else. And remember that it's a public platform on, the World Wide Web. Antivirus and endpoint protection. Typically at work, you have an antivirus that's installed on your systems at work. If you're using a different system at home, just ensure your antivirus is up to date. Your endpoint protection, if you're using mobile devices to access. Bring your own device or BYOD. Not sure if there's policies, but some organizations have policies regarding what you can do with your own device. And they might want to ensure that that kind of security is incorporated on what you're using to access the systems. Secure networking, so being remote, making sure that your wireless access is using some sort of WPA or some sort of protection, encryption, so that it can't be hacked as easy from neighbors or malicious people surfing out in the parking lot. There's a link here. I think Heather, if you email her, she'll distribute this deck. You can go. There's some great tips. This is from the National Cybersecurity Association Administration, NCSA. But there's a lot of them. You can just Google COVID-19 and cybersecurity. You'll find a lot of great articles, a lot of tips, and a lot of them are going to be very similar to what I'm talking to you about today. So I just have some questions that I'm going to go through. I'm going to ask and answer. And if this prompts other questions, just make sure you message those to Heather, and at the end of this, we'll have some time for Q&A. So what is the difference from working at home? We kind of covered some of that with these ideas, but when you're at home, you're not on your work network. And if your organization has compute equipment on premise at your work, so in other words, the servers that you access where your data is stored, the applications you use, if those are stored on premise at your work, then you're going to be trying to get there from your house through your internet service provider to your work to access those applications and data. And there's usually what we call a firewall, which is just a way to guard the stuff that's at your work. If your organization instead, though, uses the cloud, like maybe you're on, Google Apps or Microsoft or whatever, and your stuff is cloud-based, it gives you a little bit more security, because the same security you use from your work to get there, you can actually incorporate from your home. So there is a difference from working at home you have to be aware of. You're working on sometimes your own equipment, your own private wireless access, and sometimes there's an issue with that, especially if you don't have really good down and upload speeds or broadband speeds on your wireless access. You're not going to have the same ability that you would at work. Also, it might be extra charges on your home account. So that's something to be discussing with your employer if it causes your charges to go up if you have a data limit. And so that's another thing to consider from working from home. Also, working at home, you're going to be in an environment that's maybe going to be subject to other people, and it depends on what kind of work you're doing. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. What vulnerabilities does this introduce? Just those. People that, if you have private information that you're accessing for your job, that's privileged information, you have to make sure you protect that in your home environment from even your own family. And in some cases, it's illegal for your family to see specific protected information. So what can you do about it? I would work with your IT staff at your work, or if you're outsourced, or find somebody in the community that can do that. Reach out to Heather. We can provide that for you if you need it. To look and make sure that what you're doing from home is secure and that you're not wide open to breaches or incidents with your data for your work. Do you have a current security policy? Well, a lot of companies have a policy, but they don't in there have working from home verbiage. So if you're involved with that, or you might prompt somebody in your organization, if that's not your responsibility, to say, hey, does our security policy really cover this? And I have some examples if you want to reach out that we can send out and distribute as well. What a security policy should include for verbiage from working from home. That covers both the organization and you. What restrictions or regulations is your work subject to? This is the point I wanted to make a little earlier. If you're a healthcare organization and you're dealing with HIPAA or PHI, EPHI, obviously, according to rules, you're not allowed to let someone see that's not supposed to see it. So you have to protect it even from your own family. There's other regulations that are out there. You could be an educator, and there's FERPA. You could be dealing with credit cards if you're doing point of sale. You could be dealing with criminal justice information. You could be dealing with tax information, FTI from the IRS. There's a lot of regulations out there that regulate certain kinds of what we call PII, or personal identifiable information. It's privacy. And so just know what restrictions you have at work, apply at home as well. And if there's a breach or an incident, it can be costly to you and your organization. And so that's why the policies are so important for working from home. How does this affect my work at home? Exactly what we just said. You know, you just have to make sure that you protect anything that you're regulated or restricted. That could even include just private information that's trade secrets from your work, you know, financial information. If you're working in the finance or HR information that's private, just protect that and make sure that your work area is in a way where you can protect that information and keep it private. So those are some questions. Training. There should be training involved, and if this work from home situation is extended, training is something that should be ongoing. And so I would recommend that if you're involved at your organization in the decision-making position, that you would recommend that the training continues, and especially keeping people up to date on cybersecurity, notifications, things that are trending. If there's been a phishing incident that someone reports, that you get it out to everyone and make them aware of it. Keep communication happening. Crisis management, incident response. What if you're working from home and there is an incident? How do you respond? Is there a process at your organization to do that? Things to be aware of and think about that are different from working remote than perhaps working. If you're a frontline person and you're going to work every day, God bless you. We appreciate the people that have to do that. I'm quarantined in my home, working from home, and support IT clients all over Anchorage and out of Anchorage area in Alaska as well. And we have offices in California. So we're having to do that. California is completely shut down as well. But we're also supporting those people who have to go into work, as well as those who are working remote from home. So in all these, we're asking you to be aware of, cybersecurity, and don't forget, being distracted, these kind of things. We're all kind of going through this together. Up-to-date software is my last really question that I have to talk about. And the up-to-date software is basically saying maybe your home systems are not up to date. You don't have the latest version of whatever you need to work in. It might not be compatible if you're using Microsoft's, Excel or Word or different things, and you're on an incompatible version. Most of those are reverse compatible, and there's not a problem. But also like your antivirus or other software, make sure that that's up to date and compatible with you're working from your job, your organization. And, always be situationally aware of where you're at, what you're working on, who has access to your computers, what your current home network security looks like. And if you're not sure, you can ask somebody. If you know how to access your internal routers at your house or your firewalls that are built into those routers, you can go and look and see what kind of wireless access your home wireless is putting out. And if it shows WPA, that's the kind of protection we're looking for. Most of them now use that, but some of the older ones still do not. They're unencrypted, they're unprotected, and so your wireless can be hacked pretty easily from someone in the neighborhood. Those are things to look at. So with that, if there is any questions at this point, I'll open it up to questions. Otherwise, I have a couple more things I can talk about. I can talk about this stuff all day, but some of the older ones still do not. They're on.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
So there's a question from the audience, and do you mind going back 3 slides to the one about policies? Can't remember where it was. So this question came in, and you were going very quickly, so thank you for being concise. But this question came in, and it says, Jim, we didn't have policies specifically regarding remote work prior to this public health emergency and work from home suggestions or guidelines or mandates in some states. So do you suggest that we quickly create policies, or do you think we should just kind of give guidelines or framework? So I think what the caller is asking is, how specific do we need to be for work from home policies? Or could the employer just do some basic guidelines, best practices to sort of get through this hump?
And I think that's a really great question, and thank you, Heather. And so with the policies, I have some stuff, Heather, that I'll send to you. You can distribute to those subscribers that are on the day, those in attendance. But a lot of it is already probably covered under overarching. But if you don't have a policy around people using their own devices and now they're having to do that, I would make sure that there's something in place for that. If someone's using their own wireless and now it's costing them money to work from home that they wouldn't normally have to deal with, that might be something that you consider, some sort of a stipend. I know everyone's suffering right now. Cash flow is a hard thing for a lot of businesses, but to bring your own device, misuse of personal emails. So there might be a way, when you're at home, you're going to be working on your personal computer a lot of times. And so now you got personal email, personal things mixing with work. Be very careful, try and delineate those, and maybe even put some words in some sort of a guidance or a policy that talks about that. Syncing and sorting business information on personal cloud accounts. So if you're syncing up to your, say that you have a shared drive in the cloud, some people are using what they call a virtual private network or a VPN. But because so many people are working from home using VPNs right now, it's taking a lot of bandwidth. And you have to be really careful from the time you start using a VPN. So a virtual private network is just actually saying I have a private pipe through the World Wide Web connection. So I go out of my house to my internet service provider. Maybe I'm using MTA, Matanuska Telephone Association, and I'm accessing someone else who has a complete different ISP, but I have to go over the World Wide Web, which is wide open. So a VPN or IPsec is another type of a tunnel that's used that gives you a private connection from one point to the other, and it really helps secure you. But the problem is that sometimes those VPNs route through areas where they take bandwidth and performance is down. So people will have a tendency just to try and say, well, I'm not going to use the VPN. I'm just going to get out to the internet. Well, now you're unprotected. So there might be a policy about how you access private things in the cloud. Misuse of personal unsecured connections to employer systems. So there might be some policy or guidance about how they connect to your work or to the cloud where your stuff is stored, your work stuff. Misuse of unsecured conference lines. So maybe now you're doing conferencing or using Zoom, and making sure that if you're doing stuff that's private or secure, that you have a way of making sure that it is. Misuse of public unsecured wireless connections. A couple of them I wrote down here, misuse of easily identifiable passwords. So maybe you have a password policy at work, but you just haven't thought about people working from home. So that's a long answer to the question, but I think what I could do is I'll send out some suggestions to Heather, and then if you want, just when you reach out to her, we can distribute some of those ideas, and then if you need more in depth on that, we can be available for that. Does that answer the question enough, Heather?
Okay, so I have another question for you. Are you ready for another question?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so this one, and I can't wait to hear the answer because I was curious too, is the federal likely to be lenient regarding cybersecurity guidelines or requirements that they've had in the past? Are they likely to be lenient during these unprecedented times?
Well, I think that they're going to, so I've done auditing, and I'll just give you an example for HIPAA healthcare, right? PHI, that's someone's private personal information. It's not yours. It's just like it'd be your information. And so when you sign up to work in an environment where there's private information that's protected, you have to use every due diligence to protect that. Now, if there's something that happened, OCR might turn their head, but it's not all that. It's even if, like policies, you can look at some of the things that have happened in that industry where it's just based on negligence or lack of due care or not being able to tell a compelling story about why the breach or incident happened with someone's healthcare or other private information. So the world works like this, and I'll just describe it briefly and maybe it'll help visualize it. Really, privacy is where everything starts. It's private information. And so we all are individuals that have records. I have records about my health. I have records about my credit card stuff, my finances. I have records that, you know, I'm in education, so there's also education records with my students, you know, and so you can start looking at privacy. Well, then the federal government gets involved and says, okay, this specific kind of private information, we're going to regulate it. So regulation like HIPAA, FERPA, CJIS. If you're, you know, dealing with people from California, you're under CCPA. If you're dealing with international, you're under GDPR. There's so many privacy rules out there now about private information, because we're all individuals that want our privacy protected. Then regulation drives compliance. So at your company, there's some way you're trying to comply with regulation. If we don't comply, we could be subject to some sort of violation or fine or censure or something. And because of that, you then look at, I'm driving this circle from privacy all the way to security, because at the end of the day, we do then an analysis on that. We'll do an audit to say, how compliant are we and what are our gaps and what are our risks? So risk management's involved now. And then the risk, the way we deal with risk is security, which is our controls we put in place. So, you know, it's this big circle. And so I can say from a cybersecurity perspective, there's probably going to be some leniency, but when it comes to the end game, which is privacy, that is going to be subject to, you know, whoever was violated and what, you know, and how bad the incident was. So I would just, my suggestion would be very careful. I believe there's probably going to be some leniency if you can tell a compelling story, but if the breach or incident is because of lack of due care or some sort of policy or thought process and someone's private information has been violated or breached, I just don't want to give you a false sense of security that you're going to be okay. Hopefully that answers the question. I know it's kind of complicated, but back to you, Heather. We have any more questions? Are we still connected? I'm not hearing anything.
All right, thank you. I do have one more question. Jim, thank you for, yep. Can you hear me okay? I hope so.
I can hear you
Fantastic.
great.
So we have one more question, and it was specifically regarding the privacy and, you know, the expectations of privacy. And so because we are in a work from home situation, and you had mentioned it earlier that we've got children and family members that we're perhaps all sharing the same device. The question appears to be about that, because it is, what is your advice for the worker who is working at home or the manager managing a worker from home when you know that that device is also being shared by perhaps a teenager or another young adult so they can do their online school? And does that introduce any other vulnerabilities, not just that someone's on the device, but they are also downloading apps and everything to make sure that they can do their schoolwork? And again, I'm sorry about the question, but it's kind of vague like that. But what I think the caller is trying to get to is, given the fact that we have shared devices, where are our vulnerabilities?
That's a really good question, Heather, and thank you for whoever asked it. It depends a lot. There's vulnerability, so it depends on where the data actually lives that you're accessing, right? So if the data lives at work on a server and you're just accessing it and you're seeing it on your screen, but when you sign out, it's not stored locally on your computer, or if it's stored in the cloud in a secured location, you have a lot less vulnerability because the data doesn't live on your device and it won't be easy to access it. A lot of companies talk about what you'll hear, MFA, multi-factor authentication. It's talked about a lot, but it hasn't been implemented as much as it should be. Multi-factor means that you have to have more than one thing to get access to specific data. In this case, would be private data. So it's a password and something else, a token, a code. If you've ever been where you go to get onto something and they send a code to your device, like your cell phone, and you have to type a code in, that's multi-factor authentication, so that it's a lot harder to hack that that's you. So if you're sharing a device with teenagers at home who are doing school, if the data is stored there locally, you can talk to your IT provider and say, hey, I have information that's private stored on my local computer. This device gets shared. Can I encrypt those files in a way that, or protect them with multi-factor where it's going to be a lot harder for someone to access those? So that's one of the vulnerabilities. If your data is not stored locally, you're a lot less vulnerable because the data is not there living on your computer, and they would have to be able to sign in and access the systems that you use to get to that private data. So I would just make sure you have a good password. If you're storing data or working on files locally, that you put them somewhere that is secured. If you have to just dump them off on a secured drive somewhere where they're not stored on that computer where your teenager or whoever is accessing that, would be one way to kind of mitigate that risk and to approach that vulnerability. So that's what comes to mind on that question. It's a great question though, and I would just have to be, advise you to be very careful about the access to anything that you are working on that could be private and you don't want to disclose to anyone, including your family. Hopefully that answers the question. And if you need more details, I can help with that later, just through you, Heather. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. That was the last question that came through via the chat. And to be honest, cybersecurity is way over my head. So I don't have any questions for you either. But if you could for the viewers still on, this video will be available or this recording webinar will be available via playback shortly. As soon as I get off the phone with Jim, I will hop over to our life-size client and grab that URL for playback and throw it out on our social media accounts. If you have an idea for another topic or future cybersecurity questions for Jim, I would invite you to email them to info@thestrivegroup.com. And then from me personally, Heather Kinsey here at the Strive Group, I'd like you to just keep trying to be positive, be there for your employees and for your workforce. Take care of yourself, strive for positivity. That's what I've been trying to tell everybody. And thank you for joining us today. Jim, if you don't mind, advance to the very last slide so I could sign off with a little bit about you. Once again, many thanks for Jim Bates with Business Improvement Group for joining us here today for this 30-minute webinar on cybersecurity. All of the services that Jim offers are up here on the slide. We also have his contact information should you want to get in touch with him. If you are interested in the slide deck, you can always email me or email the Strive Group, info@thestrivegroup.com, and I'll be happy to get this slide deck out to you. But other than that, I thank Jim for his 30 minutes today, and I thank the viewers that joined us. And feel free to share the playback as soon as it goes out to our social media. So enjoy yourself, enjoy your day, be productive, and go wash your hands.
Thank you.